Welcome back. In this video we're going to start looking at the mixed mode grabbing, and this is something that is going to take a few videos to get through. I can't really figure out a better way of doing this and kind of experiment my way through this because it's kind of complicated, I realize. So let's see, where should we start? Let's go into the motion control first. So one thing for sure we need to administer and have control over is the way that we collide with things. And for one thing that's definitely going to be an issue is the collision between the hands itself. So the hand mesh and this collision grab sphere here. So we need to be extra careful that we have control over that. And as it just happens in the VR template, once you scroll down, you're gonna see that it has a collision preset set to no collision, and that means that it's going to be treated as a world static. And basically under certain circumstances we don't want this to be a world static or to collide. So I'm actually going to change this to a pawn setup here. Okay, and that is going to be, I'm going to get back to why I do that in a later time. But for now, make sure that you take your hand mesh and set that to be a pawn. Also, we need to make another setting for when we grab in a mixed mode. So because we need to work with a collision now. Let me try and explain this. So what we're gonna do is to hold an object and we're gonna see if it hits something, and we can technically detect the hit, but once it's hitting, we want to make sure that it turns into a physics handle. And once it doesn't hit anything again, then we want to turn it back. So I suppose you can do that by maybe looking at how long time since the last hit against something happened. I haven't really tested that out yet, but just thought that occurred to me. But I'm going to leave it up to you guys to see if you can come up with an alternative solution for this. But the thing is, I need to be able to check at some point in order to check consistently if I'm hitting something. I need to do that actually with an overlap. And in order to do an overlap, I have to do that overlap test myself. And that means that my object needs to be responding to the overlap event or channel. So inside the collisions, I'm going to add a new object channel here called grabbed. Grabbed object, which I'm going to set to overlap and close that. So let's continue into the pickup cube itself. So we need to make a few changes here as well. To begin with, I actually think I'm going to spend some time in this video to clean up this, because we're going to need this to be kind of neat, otherwise we're going to lose track of what we're doing here. So this stuff here, we have the event pickup, and this stuff here is attached to. So we're going to collapse this to a function and call this grab attach to. And then we're going to take this stuff here and we're going to collapse this to a function as well and call that grab physics handle. And guess what? We're going to have another one called grab mixed mode. But we're going to do that in a moment. So also we're going to take this stuff here and collapse that and say drop attach to. And we always want to do this stuff here, so I'm actually going to move this I'm actually going to make a sequence here because I want this to happen as the last thing, but I always want this to happen. And then collapse this to a function and drop as a physics handle. Okay, so there's a little bit of reorganization that will hopefully serve us well in a while, short while. Okay, so we have a few things that we should build the check for an overlap, and we can do that. We need to do that in two ways. So at least as far as I could tell, I needed both to detect a hit event, but once I had the hit event, I actually needed to check also if there was an overlap manually. Otherwise, it kind of fell apart in some edge cases. So for this one, I'm gonna subscribe to the event on component hit, this one. And what I'm going to do here is to save the time where the overlap, or I'm going to call this an overlap, because technically, well, it's not an overlap, but yeah, well, we could call it hit time. Let's call it hit time. I was going to be a float, and we're going to set that. So we need this time where we had a hit or a collision. Maybe we should call this collision time. Oh, fuck. Just gonna leave it. But on top of that, we also need to check every tick event, or every time it, the tick event fires. We also need to check if we are in a mixed mode. So if this is equal to mixed and we are holding something, so, or being held by something. And we can check if we are being held by something by checking if this is valid. So if these two things are true, then we want to check if there's an overlap. Like this. Okay. And let's see. The manual way to check if there's an overlap is to drag in our static mesh component, and you can do component overlaps components. So this is a very neat function or node that you can use to check if there's an overlap. So what this allows us is to take a component transform, so we can move it to a transform or position, and on that position we can detect if there's a overlap. So our location that we want to check is the world transform. So you might be thinking that this is overcomplicating things, but the thing is, well, it's going to be clear later on why I do this, or maybe it won't. I'm not really sure, because I went through a lot of trial and error to get to this this solution here, so I can't really outrule the fact that it might be another better approach to do this. But I'm going to show you guys how I did this anyway, as best as I can, and hopefully it's going to make sense. You can see here I'm checking with a few types of objects, and we also actually need to make sure that there are some actor types that we don't actually want to ignore, and that is actually the motion controller actor itself, because that is this component overlap components is going to detect an overlap with that stuff anyway also, so we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I'm going to do that by creating a list of actors that we want to ignore, and basically you want to ignore any actors of type BP motion controller, because you don't want to push it away, or the other hand getting in the way. So when on begin play, we can get all actors of class. Get all BP motion controllers, and then create a variable to hold that. And call that actors to ignore. So that means that we can use this variable here, like this. Component class filter we can leave empty for now. So depending on whether or not we get a hit, we want to do a few things. Let's see. Okay, so if we are getting a hit here, that means that we want to drop the attached to, and then we want to switch to a physics handle. Basically, that's what we want to do. But since this is running on a tick, we only want to do this once. So we're going to guard this by a do once node here. And so we made these very handy functions here, so we can use them now. So say drop attached to, and then we want to pick it up, grab as a physics handle. And if the false part is true, we want to do something similar, just the other way around. Drop the object as a physics handle, and then grab as attached to. So that means that it doesn't collide with anything anymore, and then we want to switch back to an attach. So what we also want to do is to make sure that this gets called. So actually this one needs to go down to the reset here, because that means that this is going to start checking, and this is also going to go up to the reset up here. Let's make it a little bit neater by double clicking here. Okay. I don't really see a way of this getting really pretty. Okay, so actually we need one more thing, because once we grab our item in a mixed mode, we want to make sure that we call the appropriate, get the setup here initialized correctly. So we actually want to create a custom event here that we can call, which I'm going to call open do once gates, which is going to be calling this reset and this reset. But since I can't do that, we're going to add a sequence. So I'm going to call the reset here, and then we're also going to call the reset here. Okay. Okay. So this is the basic setup. I can assure you this is not going to work, but I wanted to build this setup here first. So we have a kind of a baseline of to work with once we continue in the next video. So I'm going to continue to build the mixed mode grabbing logic here and see how far we can get with that. So see you in the next. Bye bye.